morning, everyone. Welcome to the UBC Learning Circle, hosted by the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We are very pleased today to welcome Carrie Anne Vanderhoop to come and chat with us today about being a weaver and how that's guided your life and your work and all of that above. So I'm really excited. It's going to be a really encompassing conversation. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional, ancestral, unceded, and occupied territories of the Hunkaminam-speaking Musqueam people. I would also like to acknowledge the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle. To everyone participating today, the topics we cover can sometimes be sensitive or emotionally triggering. If that's you for today, please make sure that you're engaging in some self-care. Talk to a friend, elder, family member, or counselor, whatever it is that you feel you need in that time and space. So introductions quickly. My name is Cole. I'm from the Churchill First Nation. I'll be facilitating the session and kind of watching in awe with all of you today. Other team members in the room today but off camera are Cynthia, our production coordinator, and Jordy, our assistant coordinator. For those of you on Zoom online, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. I don't normally do an introduction, but I think, Carrie Anne, you have so much to say, so I'm just going to pass the microphone on to you and watch and listen.
Thank you. Hawa. Logan. I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm a visitor here on the unceded ancestral territory of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. I moved down here from Haida Gwaii not so long ago. Diu Hadagan Kinawas, Hinu Di Kian. My Haida name is Kinawas. The name I was given at birth is Carrie Anne. And my mother is Kajuf, Evelyn Vanderhoop. My grandmother, my nanny, is Ilskalis, Delores Churchill. And my great-grandmother is Selina Adams Peratrovich. I'm here to talk about my weaving. I work at the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health as the curriculum manager, working on the Indigenous Cultural Safety UBC 23-24 curriculum. So I'm happy to be here to kind of talk about something a little bit different today and tell a little bit about my background and history and the weaving stories that I know and how they've impacted my life, and maybe share a little bit about weaving in general with everybody here today. So on my father's side, I've said a little bit about my mother's side, but on my father's side, my father is a Quinawampanoag from the island of Nopi, which is commonly known as Martha's Vineyard, and I had the privilege of growing up on the lands of my ancestors. So on both coasts, I grew up most of my life on Martha's Vineyard in community with my family, kind of surrounded by community and culture and just living on the land. On my father's side, I come from a family of fishermen. On my mother's side, I come from a family of weavers. So I've been very, very fortunate to have always had that strong relationship with the land on both sides. I was born in Ketchikan, Alaska. My great-grandmother, who's Git'ans, Massett in the Eagle clan, she, I get to tell about my slides too.
Yeah.
So here you see that there's a picture of, a couple of pictures here. The one on the top left is a picture of my Nani, Delores Churchill, and that's when she received the National Endowments of the Arts Awards in the United States. We all traveled to Washington, D.C. to watch her get that award, and that's all of her granddaughters. So my sister is there on the far left, and my cousin Paula, I'm there down in the front next to my cousin Teresa May, and then on the left is my cousin Gloria. And you see that we're wearing regalia, and my nanny wove that tunic that she's wearing. And then the two pictures of Raven's Tail, where there's weaving hanging on a loom. That's a headband that I wove. And then down in the bottom right is a picture of 4 generations: my grandmother, my nanny, and my mom, and me and my daughter Rosalie. So. And then there's a picture of an apron that my nanny wove, a Nahim apron. And I just wanted to talk, like, this is a slide that kind of just generally says that, you know, we are continuing to live in relationship with the land. This is a picture of Haida Gwaii, a map of where you could see Haida Gwaii on the map, and then jamming. Me and Rosalie, one of our favorite things to do in the berry season is to make jam, and then you see that we are still harvesting fish and jarring that for the winter there. And this is pictures of where I'm from on Martha's Vineyard. So there's a map there. It's off the coast of Massachusetts. And those are the Gay Head Clay Cliffs. There's a pottery tradition in our culture there, where we harvest clay from the cliffs and we make pottery. And we're part of the Algonquin language family over on the East Coast. And so you see my sister is digging steamers, clams, and then that was the first fish that my daughter caught when she was fishing with her grandpa.
Auspicious story.
Yeah. So, and these are some old family portraits. This is my great-grandmother, Selina Adams, and then Alfred Adams. And after, on the picture on the right, my nanny is standing, and my Auntie May, my great-grandma's youngest, is there. So that's my nanny and my Auntie May. After Alfred Adams passed away in the 1940s, my grandmother remarried and moved to Ketchikan, Alaska. She married a Tlingit man by the name of George Peratrovich, and she took her youngest children with her. And so my nanny was probably about 11 when she moved from Haida Gwaii. And my great-grandmother, her marriage was an arranged marriage, and when she was growing up, they were still using canoes as a main way of transportation, and so it's just thinking about that time, that it wasn't so long ago. My great-grandmother passed away when I was 8 years old and had a really big influence on my life. When I was my first memories, my earliest memories are of the smell of cedar and of her house, because she always had her weaving on the table. Cedar was hanging in the house, and you could always hear her bracelets kind of clanking as she was weaving at the kitchen table. So that was part of my earliest memories of my great grandmother. So and everybody in the house, all of the older people would always be speaking Hadkil, or the Haida language. My great-grandmother spoke broken English. And this is just a picture of my great-grandfather, Alfred Adams. And on the picture on the left is an Edward Curtis portrait. So it's included in his collection, and he's wearing a Naheen blanket. But Edward Curtis, his whole what he was trying to capture was what he called and described as a dying, culture and peoples, so he generally would dress some of his subjects up, so put them in wigs and dress them up in kind of costumes of their time. But my great-grandfather, Alfred Adam, he was a respected leader in our community, and he is also the founding president of the Native Brotherhood of British Columbia as well. So he fought for Indigenous rights and fishing rights specifically. But I just wanted to include this portrait, these portraits, because to me it really is important to recognize that our cultural practices, our culture and our languages are things that continue to this day, and there's a revitalization, they're coming back in really powerful ways. So my great-grandmother, this is a picture of her splitting cedar bark in the woods. And I've been taught by my aunties and my grandmother and my mother about how it is that you go into the woods to gather materials. And so this is something that I think can carry into everybody's daily, everyday lives, because I don't think that we practice enough of these like mindfulness things. And so I've been taught that when we go into the woods, it's important to clear our minds and really not have negative thoughts or feelings. Because it's really important that when we're in the woods that all our senses are open. So we're listening with clear minds and feeling good feelings. We have an awareness about what's going on in our surroundings. So not being distracted by things that have happened earlier, things that are going to happen later, but actually being present in the moment so that you're not distracted, so that you're using all of your senses to be in the woods, and then listening to the trees. We have relationships with the forest. We have relationships with the trees specifically as weavers. That we're looking for a certain tree. We're looking for a tree that is a certain size and height, and that has qualities like that the bark isn't twisted or there's not some branches. So it really is important that we are keeping our eyes open. And then also we do our harvesting in the spring when the sap is running. So just kind of getting a sense of how ready the tree or how willing the tree is willing to share the bark with you. We never want to over harvest or harm the tree. We want the tree to continue to grow and have a long life. So there's all these things that you have to be aware of when you're harvesting, and never taking too much, right? So I think that those things all really can translate into principles in your life in general. Like just the being mindful, being thankful, being aware of your environment and your surroundings, and respecting that relationship and respecting that life. And then also that reciprocity. So when you're harvesting and the bark, it comes off easily and straight and everything looks well, it's really a beautiful thing. And you think about what you're going to be creating with the bark that you are harvesting. So as you're doing it, you're thinking about, this is, you think about who's been there before, who's going to be coming afterwards. You think about the idea that you are carrying on a very important cultural practice. So, and I think that also impacts your final weaving product as well. Like if you do everything the right way, you can weave and it just goes smoothly. Perhaps if it was a struggle, then you're going to have struggle weaving anything as well. So I think that also can be transferred into that. So when you're out there, after you've taken the bark from the tree, and you can see these pictures of my great-grandma, she's splitting the outer rough bark from the inner smooth, like beautiful, light-colored inner bark, cadmium layer. And so you do this out in the woods, and then you replace the outer bark. You don't just leave your outer bark in a pile at the base of the tree, but you put it down with the outer side up and place it down around the tree so that it doesn't look like there's been a huge disturbance. And then you really thank the tree. You have your bark, and she's wrapping it in the woods there too as she's carrying it out. She wove and sold her baskets to support and raise her family. And she noticed that there were not many young people learning or how to weave. So she went to the University of Southeast Alaska, and she proposed that she teach a Haida weaving class in there. And so they agreed, and she was one of the first Indigenous women to teach at the university. And she taught anybody who was willing to learn. And my nanny at the time, she was a bookkeeper at the hospital. And she was always really good at math and numbers, and she really enjoyed her time at the hospital. And she was never really into learning how to weave.
Mm-hmm.
But it was my grandfather, Alan Churchill, my nanny's husband, when all the kids were kind of grown up and off on their own, starting families and attending school, that he encouraged my nanny to learn and to help, because my great-grandmother was getting old. And so he's saying, like, who's gonna make sure that this weaving continues after your after your mom is gone? Somebody needs to make sure that the young people are learning this. And so my nanny actually enrolled in one of the classes that my great-grandma was teaching, and she tells it that she goes into the class, and her mom was like, "No, I'm not going to teach you. You never wanted to learn. You get out of here." And she said, "No, I've already enrolled and paid for the course, so you have to teach me." But I guess it was hard for my nanny, because my great-grandma was really critical of her baskets at first, but my nanny stuck with it, and for her, she's become such a renowned weaver, and she travels all over the world and teaches. And both my great grandmother and my nanny have visited museums to study and be in the presence of a lot of the ancient pieces that were collected and wound up in museums all over the world. And I think that that's something that has happened since the time of my great grandmother. My nanny would go to museums. My mom goes to these museums, and we revisit them. Throughout our life, and I've been fortunate to visit many museums in different places around the world too, just to look and be in, because those are our greatest teachers, seeing those objects.
Mm.
So my nanny learned how to weave, and that's my great-grandmother at her kitchen table I talked about, with her weaving materials in front of her and with her bracelets on.
Yeah.
So they went and my nanny learned how to weave and became my great-grandmother's teaching assistant as my great-grandmother was getting older. And so they visited different villages all along Southeast Alaska, and she taught Haida weaving. And because my nanny had worked in the hospital for so long, she really enjoyed visiting the elders in the hospitals. And so she would go to the hospitals in the villages that they were teaching, and she would visit the elders there. And she started bringing them weaving materials. And so in those times, she started learning about the different weaving techniques and designs of the Tlingit and the Tsimshian, and just with visiting the elders in the hospital. And so she learned those techniques. So, throughout her lifetime, she's been able to go back to those villages and teach them their own weaving styles and their own. My nanny, when she teaches, because she teaches anybody who is interested in learning, she points out that we're all descendants of weavers. So weaving is the innovation that has helped us survive in our environments. It's one of the earliest innovations, and so we all are descendants of weavers. We all have that kind of thread that leads us back to that relationship with the land, and it connects us all together as well. And I think that's really powerful. And so Haidas weave in a certain way. We weave upside down, so from the top to the bottom, and that's kind of unique. The Tlingits and the Tsimshians, they weave from the bottom up, and we weave in a Z twist, and other weavers will weave S twists too. So there's different weaving techniques and methods, and so when she teaches her classes, also she teaches one way, and she says, well, if you're finding that you're comfortable weaving in a different way, or you have a different method of doing it, to stay with that method and to listen to that, because that may just be the way that your ancestors would have woven, and to recognize that we do have this genetic memory of our histories throughout time, and so to go with that, to acknowledge that and honor that, and maybe not try and force a different style, but stick with your own, because that's. So I think that that's also very powerful and speaks to what we carry with us in our very, deep in our very genetic makeup. So, so here's a picture of my nanny, my great grandma, and my mom there, and my teachers. And here's a picture of them harvesting in the forest. And a picture of my nanny and her 3 daughters. So I have my Auntie Holly and my Auntie April, and they're all weavers. But like my nanny, my mom, she was a watercolor artist, and so she didn't start weaving until she was in her 40s, I think, or almost 40. So and she started weaving the textiles, because my nanny and my Auntie April and my Auntie Holly, they are accomplished weavers of cedar bark and spruce root, and they always wove. And my mom, she got her degree in psychology and art history as a minor, and she moved to Martha's Vineyard to bring up our family, and she wasn't a weaver. And then, so there's a story about Raven's tail weaving, which is a textile geometric style weaving, and it's that nobody had any memory of this technique of weaving. It wasn't around for generations. And there's this woman, Cheryl Samuels, who was a professor of textiles in Washington, I think, and she kind of came across this this technique, and she knew weavers of the Northwest Coast and had relationships, and she knew of the Naheen weaving, which is something that did not, there was no time where we didn't have weavers of this Naheen style or Chilkat style of weaving. But with Raven's tail, there was only like remnants of pieces, like fragments of weaving, or illustration, like paintings of the weaving that were done by early explorers, and then there was a few full intact robes. And so Cheryl Samuels kind of enlisted some help from my nanny and from another weaver, a Tlingit weaver, Anna Ellers, who was weaving on a Chilkat and Naheen weaving. And so they studied and they visited museums to kind of look at this and kind of relearn how to do this, and then they taught throughout the villages how to weave this technique of weaving. So it really made a really big comeback. Yeah, of course. And it's exciting, and I think the story of Raven's tail weaving, it makes me feel really optimistic, because for anywhere from 150 to 200 years that tradition didn't exist, and came back, and now it's thriving. So you see so many pieces of Raven's tail regalia when you go to cultural events, and there's so many amazing weavers of this technique of weaving, and so it's really a powerful story that things kind of come back to you in their time and in their way. So my mom, she had moved back to the West Coast, and she wanted to learn Raven's tail. Okay. And so let's see. Yeah, she started weaving, and I was in university at the time, and so my mom and my nanny were weaving the first Raven's tail blanket that was woven in the village. In old Massett for 150 years or more. Right. And so I went to spend some time up there in the summer to check it out and help them out if I could. And so that was my first my first exposure to weaving and weaving with them. And they put me on the side doing like side the side braiding designs where I was just kind of bringing down some of the design elements on the borders of the robe. But I enjoyed my time there, and I didn't grow up on Haida Gwaii, so I've only really had been there a handful of times visiting. And so it was nice to be there and nice to spend some time over the summer with them weaving. We were very focused. We went out to the beach a couple times, but most of the time it was like weaving from morning till night. So, but it was quite an experience, and I knew that I wanted to be a weaver from that.
Very cool.
And I've been fortunate enough to weave on all of my mother's larger projects. She's woven 3 full-size Nahin robes and a Nahin tunic. And we weave together quite a bit. That's my mother. That's her most recent over on the far right. That's her most recent raven's tail robe that she just completed and revealed at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts this past a couple weeks ago now.
Wow!
And that's a pattern board that she drew out for a Nahin robe, and then the apron right there is designed by Christian White for Christian White.
Very
so
cool.
I didn't weave on the apron, but I did get to weave a little bit on the 2 robes that you see there.
Very cool.
And that's my nanny and my mom dancing some of the weaving. My sister wove that apron that my mother is wearing.
Beautiful.
And then that's, I like to say that the picture on the left is a picture of us. We were commissioned to weave a raven's tail robe for the Canadian Museum of History. And I like to say it's a four-generation robe because we had all our young kids. My sister is pregnant with her 3rd child, and we had all our little ones kind of running around in the space when we were weaving. And my nanny spent some time weaving on that robe as well. And I want to tell a story of my nanny. I was just visiting with my Auntie April recently, and my nanny is so busy all the time. She's like a jet setter. She travels everywhere. She's 89 years old, and she still travels independently, going to different places to teach and to lecture and to visit family. And she always shows up, in important life events. She always has time. And she's so generous with her knowledge and with her time and with her love. And we were just marveling at her because we usually do like, oh, where in the world is Nani? It's like, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? And so we were talking, well, where is she these days? What is she doing? How is she doing? And I kind of made the connection that she's like that story of the very first basket that was ever woven, right? Because she just has an abundance of time, and she's so generous. And so it was like the story, the way that I remember it is that there was a village and it was experiencing famine. The salmon weren't running yet, and the berries hadn't quite come into season, and the animals hadn't recovered from the winter either. They weren't showing up in the birds. There was no eggs in the nest. And so the food was very scarce. And there were two young sisters, and they had been going hungry. And the mother left to go fetch some water for soup, and there was some dried fish, and the youngest sister was really complaining about being hungry, and so the older sister, to soothe her, gave her some of the dried fish that was like critical at this point. So when the mother came home, she really scolded the sister very harshly, which is something that just wasn't acceptable. Back then, we treat all children with a lot of respect. And so the sisters ran away.
Mm-hmm.
And they ran and ran until they came to a part of the forest that was not familiar to them. And they saw a forest fairy, which is really good luck. And it's a supernatural character. And so this forest fairy taught them and showed them. She wove a tiny basket out of roots around her little finger. And she said, "You fill this basket and you'll never go hungry." And the older sister is thinking in her head, that little basket could barely hold one little berry, one small berry.
Mm-hmm.
And so the forest fairy led them to a place where the berries had ripened. And she gave them the basket and told them to go ahead. And so the oldest sister put the berry in the basket. And she saw it. She looked down. She's like, "Oh, it looks like there might be enough for one more berry." And so she put that second berry in the basket. So, "Oh, maybe one more will fit in there," and so on and so on. So it seemed the berry basket expanded and expanded and expanded the more and more that she put the berries in the basket. And so they filled that basket until it took both those little girls to carry it back to the village, and they showed the mom. And there was enough berries to share with everybody. And then, as in a lot of Haida stories, Mom dies of shame. scolding the children. And I think that there's a lot of lessons in that as well. Be respectful of our children, and also that whole idea, like Nani is so busy all the time, but she just seems to be able to continue to share, continue to be generous with that time, continue to show up when it's really, really important. And that I think that when we do that, then we receive so much as well, and we just continue to receive more and more as we give out to the world. So that's another lesson that I take from those stories. And so on the picture on the right is the picture of us dancing. My sister is dancing that robe that we completed, and her oldest son, Brian, is dancing on her side. But you can see that there's just like an abundance of that beautiful technique of weaving.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, these Nahin robes were, chief's robes. And during potlatches, chiefs would, to distribute wealth and to show their wealth and their power and their prestige, they would cut the robes up and they would distribute it to people at the potlatch. And this is an example of a robe that's been kind of patched together from different pieces that were probably collected.
Very cool.
I think that's really neat.
Yeah.
But that whole idea of distributing wealth and giving to show your status is important. That the more we have to give, the better we can take care of each other. Is how we are lifted up through our communities. Just that general caring for each other. And this is a picture of a spruce root hat. I have my spruce root hat that I'll be showing, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful picture. And there's a story in the there's a story of a weaving pattern that is spider web and snail's trail. This isn't the exact pattern, but the story goes like that there was a spider web hanging in the dawn, and dew was reflecting out beautiful rainbows, and the spider was sitting up there in her web feeling so proud of her beautiful creation. And then a snail comes along and he says, "I can make something beautiful too." The spider thinking, you're such an ugly thing, so low to the ground, and how could you make anything beautiful? And then the snail zigzagged, and then the sunlight hit the snail's trail, and it did the same. The beautiful, beautiful rainbows. So I think that's a really good lesson that I like and enjoy from the stories of weaving. So that beauty comes from unexpected places. And this is my sister and her third child, Novella. And warp, Naheen warp for a robe, and then that's a set at the kitchen table with all our weaving materials and tools right in front of us. So I just wanted to show this is like continuity, that, you know, we grew up really seeing our my aunties and my mom and my great grandmother, my nanny, all at this, and so being a weaver and being from a weaving family gave me a sense of responsibility and a sense of making sure that I'm carrying the stories, the teaching, the lessons on with me, and to continually practice that and to weave. And so it's been a really huge part of my life to do that, and I feel very privileged to come from the family that I'm from and have that kind of unbroken matrilineal line of weavers, and I'm very feel very honored that I have a daughter that can continue this and carry it forward. And so just including those little ones is really important, and for them to see and they're always watching. I think about what I took away from my experiences growing up with my family and being in the woods, that I know that they're always watching, and that these lessons can really impact and influence their lives just like they influenced mine. And so just practicing and being visible and being an example is important for our little ones, and carrying on this. So this is me and my mom and my daughter looking at the weaving. So I brought a whole bunch of stuff to show and share. I don't know what, I feel like my stories and stuff taken quite a bit of time. But just to give you a sense of what's here on the table right now,
okay.
Unless anybody has any questions or...
Yeah, we can wait a moment and see if anybody has any questions. Please feel free to pop it in the chat box a little bit. I just wanted to say before we move forward, Carrie Anne, thank you very much for sharing that story. It was floored, just witnessing that generational knowledge and obviously how much of an impact that's had on your life, and it was really touching to hear. So I just wanted to thank you very much for gifting me that story. It was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it doesn't look like anybody has any questions, but if you do, just pop them in there and we'll make sure that we address them as we go. So what do we have on the table here?
So I just want to say, when my mom started weaving, my nanny really was kind of discouraging to her, because she said that she didn't think that my mom had thick enough skin. My mom, you know, she is sensitive, but she's very strong, and but I think that at the time there was you know, some differing minds and thoughts about this, specifically the Naheen weaving, and who started it, who were the first to weave it, and whether Haida's wove it at all. And one of the arguments was because we don't have mountain goat wool, we don't have mountain goats on Haida Gwaii, so you know, where would we get our mountain goat wool? But I just want to acknowledge that about relationship, that there was a really complex trade system that was all along the coast. I mean, we had, you know, large canoes, and we're canoe people, and from, you know, the far north to Mexico, there's there's these trade systems, so we could really get materials. For example, on Haida Gwaii is where you can get the best spruce roots, because we have miles and miles of sandy beaches where the spruce roots grow, and they grow really straight and in abundance. And so we always had really great places to gather our spruce roots, and so that was a huge trade item. Also, Oolakins is a good trade item. There's a story that at one point there were Oolakins on Haida Gwaii, but that because they felt disrespected, that they moved and they didn't come back. So we had to trade for our Oolakin and our Oolakin grease. And then also we traded for mountain goat wool, and we have oral histories that tell us that include mountain goat wool in their stories of like chiefs that to show their power and wealth, would dump out and share and distribute mountain goat wool to show how powerful they were. So we traded, and we got our resources. We shared our resources. So there was a collaboration, and I think that the raven's tail is the technique of weaving in the blankets that were the most ancient. So the evolution of weaving went from the basket weaving and netting, making mats and making cedar clothing. It evolved into that using wool. So initially we would use cedar clothing. So you'd pound the cedar, and then you'd hang cedar on the loom, and then you'd weave from left to right, which is the same with raven's tail. You take your weft and you start on the left, and then you would tie off on the right. And then just after time and seeing that the artists using all the form line beautiful designs, that okay, well, how can we translate that into the weaving? So I think that there was a great leap of innovation where we didn't start on the left, tie off on the right, but that there was this, we're going to take that and move back and forth and weave left to right, right to left to right, to create that kind of form line design.
Okay.
Who knows who were the originators of this, but that's where it went. So it's a beautiful way of weaving. What's interesting is that with the raven's tail, that's geometric. You can map it all out and graph it, and then it's so nice and easy. You just left to right, and you go back and you see your design just coming down very evenly. And then, but in the raven's tail, there's something like 17 actual techniques of weaving. With the Naheen or Chilkat style of weaving, there's just two. You do, there's three, but you just do the basic 2-strand twining and then the 3-strand braids. And that's overall, that's how you accomplish these. But it's so complex. You can be working with, I think I counted over 150 warp ends dangling from my loom at one point, and I'll show you how complex that looks. But here we have some material. So the difference between raven's tail and Naheen or Chilkat weaving is that with the raven's tail weaving, it's pure wool is used, and traditionally it was mountain goat wool, and I generally prefer to use merino wool because it's close with the softness and the sheen. With the Naheen weaving, it's thigh spun wool that includes yellow cedar bark. So here's the yellow cedar bark that's kind of prepared for spinning. And it's just stripped into really, really thin strands, and then it's thigh spun in with the wool. So this is just an example of what somebody must have been starting a basket or hat, but that's how it is prepared for spinning. And so here's an example of the warp there. Just want to have a look at it. And then my cones for the colors that you see in the raven's tail. Although people are being quite creative with their with their designs and with the colors that they use, because we have so many beautiful commercial dyed yarns, and so you can really get creative and innovative. But traditionally, it was generally that you'd have the white and the black, and then some yellow in that in the nahin. And also, I think that we had this blue dye traditionally, and every place has a different source of creating this kind of blue color, which is really interesting in those ancient robes. And I think people were a little bit secretive about where they were getting and their sources for this really beautiful blue. But I think there's stories and there's paintings that kind of look like the robes had a blue hue to them. So that's interesting. But the Chilkat or Nahin style uses traditionally the yellow and the blue and the white and black as well. So that's kind of the difference. And the Nahin has the form line, curves, and circles, where the Raven's Tail is the geometric.
Right.
So that's some of the differences between.
So just to summarize, especially related to the colors, so everybody used white, black, and yellow, and then the blue was maybe sometimes used or seems to have been used, and the different sources are not really known of how that blue was created.
Oh, well, yeah, we know because of different testing and because of oral histories that where some of the blue came from and the blacks. Like, there's different ways to get blacks. It's just it's a matter of the resources that were available in your natural environment. So we had hemlock dye, moss dyeing with this one. Some people are say copper oxide. There's different minerals that are found in the ground that could possibly get this blue color. And then when contact came around, we utilized the blankets that had the indigo dye. That was so that they say that that may have changed the color. But I also want to say, like, with the weaving especially, and with all of our there's not a there's not in the language, in the Hudkill, there's not necessarily art, right? Because it wasn't art. Everything had a purpose and a function. Everything was functional. It was more of like the evolution of a visual language, because we worked so collaboratively with neighbors and with each other, and we have such varying dialects, but that there was always this visual language that evolved, so that you could use these objects to tell stories, to show where they belong, and what family, clan, or stories are being told just by having, say, spoons for your feasts and stuff. So I think that it was not only decorative, but they all had very specific functions and meanings. So
cool.
So yeah, that's just a little bit about the materials that are used.
Okay, so we're going to take a second and take a look at the panel here, or at the chat box, sorry. Lots of people introducing themselves. There's a little bit too many to list, so I just want to say thank you all very much for introducing yourself. We're glad that you're spending your time here with us today to engage in this story in this collaborative way. So I apologize, Selina. I hope that's how you pronounce your first name. I was about to ask if it was copper. I'd love to know more about the dyes and what natural materials were used. So I don't know if we have time to get into the specifics of it, but would you recommend, like, is there some place that people could go to learn more about these kind of traditional? Is there a resource that's available, or?
Well, there are a couple of books. Cheryl Samuels has published a couple. One is the Dancing Blanket, and then there's the Chilkat Dancing Blanket, and then there's one of the Raven's Tail. So Cheryl Samuels, I would look into her works. My mother is in the process of writing a book, and that is a book about the Haida and textiles. So she's done over 15, 20 years of research in visiting in museums and looking at all of these oral histories. And kind of putting them together to tell a story. And I've been, honored and privileged to be able to read drafts in their various versions. And I think that she's ready, and I just keep on encouraging her to do that. And my nanny actually has finished, and the book that she's going to be publishing is probably in the editor's hands now. So hopefully those will be coming out soon. But yeah.
Great. Okay, so Cheryl Samuels, we'll make sure that we keep those resources available. We'll make sure that we link to them in some way, and stay tuned to the Learning Circle. I'm sure that once those books are published, we'll be sure to send out notifications, and it'll be found in the MailChimp, and it'll be all over the place. So I think that is about all the questions we had, so I think we can move on.
How much more time do we have?
We have lots of time. We got about 40 minutes or so.
Oh, so I just, maybe at this point I'll bring out some of the weavings that I've done.
Great. And
kind of share a little bit about the weaving process.
Awesome.
This is what I was talking about with, can you see it?
Yeah.
With the complexity of the warps. So the wefts are the strands that are hanging vertically, and then the warps are all of these strings that are hanging off that makes it look quite messy. So I've tried to kind of let them hang down so you can maybe get a semblance of what the pattern is shaping out to be. And then usually you just keep them all up and try to keep them in order. These are all the 3-strand braids that surround all of the design elements, and then here's my design here on the bottom of the loom. And so it's just a simple gravity weighted loom that's used for weaving, and then you keep the tension is all in your hands. So it's different than say if you have a loom that has like a shuttle that they use in, say, the Southwest. This is the most simple style of loom that's used. And so this is going to be a design. This is a design that it has been modified from an ancient, or not ancient, but an older apron design. So I took these elements, and I'm not a design expert, and so I've been working here full time for the last 2.5 years, and living in the city and being a single mom in the city. So it has been a while since I've started my own project, and but it's important to continue to weave, and so I just started something so that I can get going and continue and have a project on the loom. And so a lot of the times I do take elements from different ancient pieces and kind of rearrange them, modify them, and create something that can fit into the spaces that I'm weaving, just for practice and to learn, because there are those weavers of the past are our greatest teachers to learn from. So I was saying I was getting into the colors. I remember. Let me just get back to that train of thought about like us being innovative and being creative. So including more like not necessarily traditional colors, and really being creative with designs. There's so many old old robes that you can see. There may be a lot of space, but people were very experimental with what they were doing, and I think that that's always been the case. So things that seem more contemporary, I think that we've always been contemporary. We've always been kind of trying to set the bar and trying to push the limits, but also recognizing that there's those elements that that are, you know, intrinsically Haida or Kwakwakiwak in the style, you know, but that we do push our and that's part of elevating our art. So I think it's really great that we continue to utilize all of our resources available to us and explore and create and continue to create in that way. There's sayings of like that the more things change, the more things stay the same, and also that, you know, you think that you've done something new, then you discover that it's been done before. You know, we can't always be owners of these innovations, but we can be part of the chain that carries these things forward. So I do like to acknowledge that it's important to recognize our teachers and recognize that we are this is much larger than us as individuals, but that each of us are really, really important. So that's something that I like to convey, because being part of this weaving family, it gives me a sense of responsibility, it gives me purpose, it gives me feelings of belonging, and it's also, you know, like something that you know, I can say to my daughter, you know, like, you are very important. You know, this is very important. Just that she's important to this larger picture, and that all of this is coming down through tens of thousands of years, and to have you here is important. So I like the innovation. I like the recognition of our history, and I think that, you know, just in gentle ways, it can come through.
So as we're looking at the loom here, this is what there's a question from the chat from Kate. This is what you mean by top down, correct? That you start at the top of the piece and work your way down.
Well, with basketry. So let me just take this. So with Haida basketry, with Devil's Club in there, it's good for protection. The Haida would start on the top and then weave around this way, whereas Klingon Simshian would weave up, right?
Right.
So we weave down.
Right. And
so, yeah, with the gravity-weighted loom, we all weave down, because that's the way that it is. But that's just it's the difference in the basket weaving technique that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think
so it's not.
Yupik people also weave down.
Right.
If I'm not, I think that's something that my grandmother's mentioned. So most other basket makers will weave their basket in the style where they're traveling up. Yeah. Whereas we weave down.
Okay. And that doesn't relate to weaving of the, like, you know what I mean? If it was an apron, they wouldn't be going from the opposite direction in terms of the completion of the apron.
Although, and I don't have it here, my very first Nahin project was a pair of bear's ears. And those you weave the design upside down. So the design was coming, so this was the bottom, and I was working on the top, which was kind of interesting and a challenge for my first.
Cool.
My first.
Very cool.
Okay, and so these are the little circles, and these designs, the way that you accomplish all of these little shapes is that 3-strand braid. So each color element is surrounded by anywhere from like 3 to 5 braids to create circles and curved designs.
It must take. So how long does it take to complete a project usually? An apron of like this, let's say this size.
Well, let's see.
It seems that it would be an incredibly intensive process from my perspective, but I don't know anything about it. So
for the full size Nahin robes that my mom has done. The first two took her about 2.5 years, like
Wow.
each. And then the third one, which I think was, to me, that was my favorite. And it was a replica of a Nahin robe that was collected on Haida Gwaii. And it was a depiction of the one in the sea, King Gus. So it was a really powerful design. And I can remember when my mom, because my mom lives half the time down in Mexico, lucky her, she would bring it out and unveil it. And you could just feel the presence in the room. And so I hadn't really felt that with the other robes that we had worked on. And so that one, I think, took us a little bit longer to weave. It depends. I've worked on headbands like this that may take like a month or two, or so it depends on how long you're working. You can't work on it. It's not that great for your back or your hands to be working on something for too long. So, putting in 7-hour days is really pushing it.
Right.
So generally, not gonna work that many hours sitting and doing this, but it could be a few months to finish.
I'm sure that
like
also
that.
plays into that thing we were talking about earlier in terms of approaching the project with good intentions and mindfulness and stuff like that. It's hard to maintain that good mindset over anything longer than 7 hours.
Yes, that's for sure. Yeah. And also that's just when you get to the weaving part of it, and it's something to consider when you're talking about the amount of hours, because you have to include that this is starting, in the woods, and I know that there have been some really amazing weavers that have actually even went so far as to harvesting their mountain goat wool. Wow. And creating things, pure mountain goat wool and hand-dyed materials. Here, I'm like, I'm used to use like what's available, these commercial materials, but we're still thigh spinning and harvesting the bark. But I mean, you just I have such a deep, deep respect for those weavers that have come before to create. They spun their warps, they spun their wefts, they dyed their materials, they were harvesting the mountain goat wool, they were harvesting the cedar, like everything. And and when you're weaving that, you're thinking about that. I mean, it's amazing, and I think it was definitely a group and a collaborative effort. I think that you'd have people that would work together on this, apprentices, and those that go ahead and try to, or they not try, but they accomplish that, they harvest their own materials, dye their own materials naturally. I mean, I have lots of respect for that.
Yeah.
So I was weaving, we would be exposed to weaving cedar and playing with cedar, making cedar reindeers at Christmas, cedar frogs, learning how to do baskets or basket bottoms for our aunties and nannies classes and stuff like that. And because I didn't grow up in the Northwest Coast most of my life, like I said, I grew up mainly on Martha's Vineyard until after my schooling. I didn't get to spend as much time weaving, but after I graduated from university, I went and I apprenticed with my mom for a couple of years, and then I got back into cedar bark weaving as well. And so this is just a hat that I wove, and traditionally this is my spruce root hat, and I got this after graduating from graduate school, and I graduated with a master's in education, and I was gifted this hat. And my great-grandmother, before she passed away, she left each of her grandchildren spruce roots that she had harvested and prepared. So the spruce roots that my great-grandmother left for me are on the top of this hat. And then my family went out and they gathered spruce roots and prepared spruce roots and did that together. And then my Auntie Holly, she wove the hat for me. So it's really a family hat with what my great-grandmother had left me and what my family had given me.
Beautiful gift.
And then this is ermine that's hanging off the back. And so I wove this hat to get back into weaving, and I hadn't really woven hats before. So this is a second hat. My first hat is even less pretty, but so I wove this hat, and it just fits as a cover just perfectly. And I don't know how many people, and I don't see it as often, but these hats, generally, your spruce root hats had cedar covers to protect them so that they stayed beautiful white and were protected. So had lots of basket covers. So it fits perfect. So it can be worn as a hat, but I usually just wear my spruce root hat, and then that's my my cedar hat.
Very cool.
Or my cedar cover. So here's an example of an apron that I did. It's topped with sea otter. So traditionally, all the textile regalia is topped with sea otter and sometimes with beaver fur. So it's soft. The sea otter is, I think, what I've heard is it's the densest fur on the planet. So it's really soft and luxurious.
Cool.
This apron is showing transitional designs. So it's kind of almost representative of making the leap from that left to right to creating patterns that we're weaving using the technique of weaving back and forth, and then the circle designs in the middle. So I wanted to try transitional design in my weaving there.
Okay, we have a lot of questions. So Selina, again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the first name. Besides spruce roots, do you use dogbane or fireweed?
No. We use maidenhair fern for false embroidery on our designs, but not those other materials.
And Patrika, what kind of I'm just going to show you the question because I don't want to butcher the language.
What kind of hod-kill phrases do you use for yourself when you're weaving? That's a good question. I am not a speaker of hod-kill, but I know that the word just to describe the twining is lease.
Okay.
But I'm not, other than that, I don't have a lot of, I think nahin is really translates maybe into house-like, and nahin is used by the Haida and the Tlingit, and then the Tsimshian word is gushalite, and that's has to do with the way that the fringe moves for the weaving. But I think that because those full-size robes are they're five-sided, and they kind of, if you turn them upside down, they look like they're in the shape of a longhouse.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then, so thank you very much, everyone, for your questions. And then Ruth asked, can we see a closer view of the hats? So maybe we will work a little bit on that. Perfect. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to lift the hat, put it a little closer, and yeah.
So I wonder if I can take this off.
There we go. Just to give everybody an appreciation for how intricate the weaving is.
I'll be right there.
No worries.
I'm just going to take it off so that I can show.
Okay, and then we'll show the cedar. Thank you, Sam. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I
Okay.
wanted to, I just took this off my moccasin, so it's a little bit, needs some water.
Mm-hmm.
The good thing about cedar bark and bark is that if your warps or anything are laying in a funny way, you just kind of put some water on them and flatten them out. But I wanted to show this this weaving. It's one of two leggings,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a dragonfly and frog design. And I like to kind of bring together my two cultures and backgrounds. So this is a story that kind of brings them together. It's a story that there was a summer I was working out in the natural resource department for the Wampanoag tribe of Gay-Hedequina, and one summer was a pretty wet summer, and so there were so many mosquitoes, and it was so hot, and you just our uniform was shorts sometimes, and it was just like, it gets hot over there in the summer. So I remember walking in this field up by our lighthouse, and the mosquitoes were just so thick you could just see them. It was just crazy.
Right.
But over the summer we had ton of mosquitoes, but then we had a ton of dragonflies, and it was just, you see the dragonflies thick in the air, and then a ton of birds. So it was a memorable summer for those particular reasons, and so I wanted to kind of make something that brought my two coasts together, and so I made this design, which is the dragonfly and the frog. Just I think our inspirations always come from our environment and from our experiences in the environment. So that's what. And then this is the ocean, the water.
Cool.
And this is representative of the beach and the lands. So I do tend to kind of try and include my East Coast, West Coast, because there are so many stories in my life that really bring those two coasts together. Like the story of my bracelet. I have this, my great grandmother. She bought 5 beaver bracelets from my Uncle Victor before she passed away for her 5 granddaughters. She's very prepared to leave us, and the bracelets are, what she always said, is so that everywhere you go, people will always know who you are, because it has our crests on it. And so I got my gold bracelet when I graduated from high school. A year after I got it, I was swimming in the ocean on Martha's Vineyard, and the waves were huge that day, and me and my auntie Faith, who's 2 years younger than me, were diving under the waves, and my bracelet, she grabbed a hold of my wrist one of the times, and my bracelet fell off in those waves, and we couldn't recover my bracelet. My sister, who's 6 years younger, she got her bracelet, her same bracelet, when she graduated from high school 6 years later. 9 years after I lost my bracelet, she called me up crying, saying, "I lost my bracelet in the ocean. It was flat calm. I just went in for a dip to cool off, and then when I came out, it was gone." Crazy. So I said, well, Tiffany, things have a tendency to come back to you, because it's true with my sister. She can lose things, and then it'll miraculously show up. And so they had a search party, and they had everybody searching the beach where they thought that she had put a stake in the sand, and they found, with metal detectors, they found the bracelet under like 3 feet of sand.
Wow.
And then less than 2 weeks later, my bracelet showed up. We had a neighbor that was walking along the beach, and he saw this shining from underneath those clay cliffs that you saw a picture of. And he picked it up, and he recognized it because it says Haida, and has XX on the inside of it, in the signature. He called. He's like, "I think, did Tiffany lose her bracelet?" And everybody's like, "Yeah, Tiffany lost her bracelet." And he's like, "Oh, well, I found it." And then they said, "Well, Tiffany already found her bracelet." And then he's like, "Well, I found a bracelet. I think I found Tiffany's bracelet. It looks just like Tiffany's bracelet, and it was mine. So it's like the story of the sister bracelets is that her bracelet fell off in the ocean to call my bracelet home, and so now we both have our bracelets, and I was reunited with my bracelet after 9 years. So I think that these objects that they have their own kind of spirit, and they have their own stories, and I really do feel like stories like that really have impacted me and have shown me the power of the things that we create and the power of our relationship to them. You know, the relationship to somebody that put all of their care and the knowledge that we have accumulated over tens of thousands of years living in relationship to our land into an object. That's powerful. And just recognizing that, and then telling those stories and telling those contemporary stories, and then being open with your clear mind and good feelings and good intentions to looking for stories like that, to being open to receiving stories like that. Yeah. So I'd also like to say, like, weaving is my act of resistance as well. Like the fact that we continue to practice our cultures and our traditions. When I'm sitting at my loom, I feel like I'm carrying something that was against the law, and that was, you know, attempted cultural genocide. So I think that it makes me feel like that's my way of resisting the assimilation, and it's a way of me honoring those who have come before me as well. This is Nahin dance cape that I wove a few years back, and I got to work with Jolin Edenshaw on the design, so we collaborated on the design of this robe. And this robe is a diving eagle, and then there's the kingfisher design on the sides there, and in the wing part of it. And I just, there's a lot at stake right now in our environments, and we've always been stewards of our territories and the land and the waters. So this is a design that I wanted to convey that because we have these birds that are fisher birds, right? They depend on the water as well. And I think that the kingfisher, it shows up in a lot of designs, and like those rattles that you see in designs of peoples and nations all along the coast there, and also can be a design that's used in secret societies as well. So I think it's a really powerful kind of supernatural spirit of the sea in the air, and just having keeping that in mind with the whole resistance thing. It's our waters. Our lands are sacred and precious, and have sustained us for tens of thousands of years. And recognizing that, and putting out my intentions, and it kind of reestablishes or reconnects our relationships with those powers. And so through weaving, I feel like I'm honoring those elements.
Beautiful. So I think as we cycle through it, I hope you don't mind, could we hold it up closer to the camera so that people can take a really close look at it? Perhaps, Sin, if you wouldn't mind just kind of helping us out there a little bit. That's awesome. Just so everybody at home can see the stunning intricacy of the design, but the way that it comes about as well. Do you know what I mean? How tight the weaving is, and for someone that myself,
that design is
tough time, even just like tying knots sometimes. So seeing something like this makes me, it's unbelievable. Great. And then perhaps we could do the leg, yeah. And I wanted to ask, why the frog?
Actually, because it's one of my crests. So
okay.
my crests are eagle, beaver, frog, sculpin.
Okay.
So it's a crest design.
Okay, cool.
And I'll have to also say that I'm really fortunate because I weave and I weave. I've been fortunate to just weave what I want to weave.
Yeah.
I have been involved in shows and I have had commissions before, but I generally will get inspiration and decide that I want to weave, and then I'll decide what I want to weave, and I own most of the things that I've woven. So I think I'm really lucky in that way. It's really hard. I see, like, it was so hard to kind of let that last full size Nahin robe that my mom did go. So you know, but she's been very fortunate to have commissions by people that are so willing to let the robe return home and be used for ceremonial events or be shown in different exhibitions. So she's worked with some really cool people that really honor that these robes are not only just meant to be on display, but they're also meant to be danced, they're meant to be used, and so it's been really fortunate. But yeah, letting go of pieces is always
So who are the kinds of organizations that commission pieces? Would they be like, like history, historians, or would they be museums, or how does that work?
Museums will commission pieces. Some, things like hospitals will commission pieces.
Okay.
Libraries, government buildings, those types of places. But generally, I think that there's a lot of the woven pieces that my family has produced have gone to private collections.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it's important that the whole relationship is important because you do put so much into these woven objects. And it's really nice when you can have a good relationship with your collectors and more meaningful, it's more meaningful that way.
Okay. And
actually, and my sister, it's nice when you can make a trade with somebody in the community and get to see your work. Like I was fortunate enough to weave a full-size raven's tail robe for David Boxley, and so I get to see that robe dancing when he uses it. There's been paintings painted of him in the robe, so it's just like you get to see it in action, and I really appreciate that. And
that's cool.
And I like it's really nice when you can keep your weaving in community and watch it.
Yeah.
Watch it. That's
be used in the community that I guess it was meant to be. Those designs were meant to be used in, right? So I think we have one more piece to showcase. Correct, Carrie Anne?
I'll just show this one it's always nice to have a piece of weaving from my nanny, Delores. So this is a bag that she gifted, and it's a two-sided raven's tail bag, and she wove this, and she's so youthful. She's, like I said, 89. She was just she's turned a lot of her attention to the preservation of Hudkill. So she's been part of that movie Edge of the Knife, where she is an actor in the movie, and she's also someone who worked with my Auntie Jane, who is 91, and they helped translate into the Northern Haida dialect, the script, and they were out there on boats, camping with the rest of the crew, getting in and out of boats on the shores. They're just so amazing and youthful. And I think that one of the things that makes my nanny so youthful is she has this, like, youthful curiosity. She goes places and she doesn't just teach, but she learns their different styles of weaving, like I said. So I think she was in South America and she learned a technique of weaving and she used that. but it's just I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I want to bring this up to the show.
Beautiful.
Designs.
It must, yeah. I couldn't even begin to think about how difficult it would be, especially when you're working with geometric shapes. You know that it's so painfully obvious if one thing is a little bit out of line, or do you know what I mean? If the shape isn't symmetrical, I'm sure, but it's just, it looks so beautiful. So I think that we've come right to the very end of a lot of time that we have today. So I just wanted to say thank you again very much, Carrie Anne, for coming in and sharing your story and all these wonderful pieces and illuminating a little bit more about weaving, I guess, as a process and kind of the history around it. I found that to be really, really informative and great. Sorry. Okay, we have one more question. The question is actually a little bit more practical. Do you teach people in Vancouver how to weave? The question comes from someone, I'm First Nations and live in Delta, would love to learn. Do you have any advice for that person, or do you teach?
I don't generally teach.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm not sure who is teaching in the area right now. Yeah, that's a good question. I know that they have a lot of great Squamish weavers down here that weave textiles, but I just haven't been, because I'm working in a different area now.
Yeah.
It's not. I haven't been as connected to the weaving world as I would normally be. But I don't teach classes. I have invited, people have approached me and said, oh, I have a project, I want to finish it, or I want to learn how to weave. And because I'll just be weaving, I'll say, sure, if you want to just come on by and weave, I'm happy to, share what I know or get you set up or give a refresher. But nothing really formal or structured.
Okay. Yeah. Right on.
Can I just say?
Yeah, of course.
Because I have my mother, my aunties, my nanny, and they are all still very much involved, I will have to say that I'm not usually the one that would give all of this information. Those are my teachers, and I hope that I, honored them by sharing the things that I know. And so I just want to recognize that as well, because they're my matriarchs.
Awesome. Okay, so the last couple seconds here, plug for the Learning Circle. Next week we have Heart Health. Dr. Jeff Redding is going to come and chat with us a little bit about that. And the following week we're going to have a session on cannabis. So stay tuned for the rest of that. And then into April we have our birth month coming up. So we're going to have several sessions about traditional midwifery and birthing and community practices, and kind of what that looks like in a contemporary context. We're super excited for those sessions, and I hope that you'll join us for them. And I think that, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you all very much for joining us. Carrie Anne, that was fantastic. And we'll see you all next time. Have a good day.